All right, today on the show, I have Mike Hruska. Mike and I go back over 30 years back to growing up in central Pennsylvania and being in the music scene as young men growing up back there. Mike is an incredible resource, a brilliant mind when it comes to learning, e-learning, and AI. And I have been so inspired by his work here over the past couple of years in the AI space. I think, as you will see, is Mike has some perspectives on AI, not based upon the ChatGPT modern approach that we've been doing for the last 4 months, but really going back farther to that, understanding neuro-networks, understanding how these computing systems and AI works. He's building AI right now in a lot of different ways. And I think what you'll find is very interesting from a very respected tech entrepreneur to hear his perspectives on where tech is going and where it's going to lead us into the future. I have one friend, he's been on a couple of different shows. He confided to me the other night, he believes he's died 1,700 times under the use of psychedelics. Right? And he's like, but every time I metamorphosize and I come back better, stronger. We've got to take that same approach to our business. Just because something is going to die doesn't mean that's a bad thing. Let's embrace the death and let's come out on the other side of that, metamorphosized, and augmented in a sense with this technology.
Yeah, there is an element of sort of disappearance here of things that we knew. There's the element of production of things that will come. There's a transformation element, and there's a teleportation element as well. And these are some of the effects from magic. So when I'm looking at change in a system, I have a TEDx talk, Change is Magic. Just look my name up, Change is Magic. It's a book I'm working on. And so if you think about change, you tell someone things are going to change, right? And so there's a starting point, then there's a shared journey. You're trying to suspend people's disbelief. Surprise comes. And then how often are people delighted by change? Not all that much. But if you look at magic as a corollary, people are in a shared context. They get their disbelief suspended. They go on a shared journey. The surprise, delight every time. No one's abhorred at a magic show. Aren't there lessons in this magic thing that we could transition over and understand fundamental design patterns to help organizations kind of think differently about change and be more deliberate and specific on what are the metaphors of change and what are the effects you're trying to create, and use that as language to motivate teams towards positive outcomes and don't violate their underlying change sort of DNA?
I literally am looking in my other browser right now. I am writing a speech, and that speech starts out talking about Wolfgang von Kepplin, who was in the court of Austria and saw an illusionist, Francois, I can't remember, the Premier, I believe it was, who essentially performed some illusions in front of the court. And Wolfgang noticed that the chicks dug it, man. And Wolfgang went out the next year and created the Mechanical Turk, which traveled the world for 70 years, defeating everybody from Ben Franklin to Napoleon Bonaparte at the game of chess. And it was a really fascinating case study. And I talk about this concept of the Mechanical Turk, of how this idea of the true idea of augmented intelligence comes from illusion. It comes from illusionists in the courts of Europe, in this, and I'm sure it goes back to the caveman that could, make you feel like you stole your nose, right? I mean, in some senses, that's very intrinsic to us. And even though it is scary, we embrace it because we understand, we understand what it is a little bit. We understand enough about it that we're okay being, I want to use the word deceived there, but that's not really applicable, I think, in the case of AI. But we're okay with that feeling inside of us of being a little bit confused and mesmerized and wowed for a moment in time.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know that there's an earlier reference, but I got to give credit. Dr. Mark DeMauro here at Pitt Johnstown University showed me a passage the other day from Gulliver's Travels, where Gulliver goes to a place where there's a big machine with all of the words and letters in the world, and they're spinning, and people are selecting things off this machine, and then it decides what the outcomes would be. He's positing that Gulliver's Travels is the first literary work that describes something that's parallel and functional to what modern AI is. I'll have to find the passage and send it to you.
I will, please, because I'm working on this speech in the other browser right now, and I really have rehearsed this one. I'm doing it like a TEDx, where I'm going to come out and do the story and then talk about that. Then talk about, I don't know if you're familiar with the whole pigeon guided missiles thing in the 1950s, but the CIA tried to work on getting pigeons to create the first guided missiles very successfully. Actually, they found that pigeons will peck at that ship on the horizon through a little glass and guide that missile right to the side of the port side of the ship. So we've always wanted to augment, right? I think that's just part of what we are as human beings. We want to augment, but now this augmentation is going to become less voluntary, I think, and a lot more mandatory, because, can you imagine an executive right now? And I know some, and I've talked about on the show, some billionaires that I know that don't allow electronic devices in their presence, but you almost can't run a business today without one of those. You're already augmented. It's right here.
Yeah.
It's the integration of augmentation.
Right. We're just kind of a node in the network here, basically.
Very true. So what is that? Let's go back to that sort of application of this. So obviously companies right now need to be really thinking about getting your data into a place where it could be turned on to an AI assistant of some type. I love what you said too about having to be autonomous in this, because look, right now ChatGPT is the hot thing. I don't know if it's the hot thing tomorrow. I don't know if it's the hot thing next week. I don't know what's behind the curtain that is still coming. So I can't integrate all of my systems to a model that might be irrelevant in 2 days. So I've got to create a middle tier. I've got to create an ability to plug and play things as needed, but also unplug those and replace those as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing, I'll throw something out there from a tech thinking standpoint. So modular is key, but multi-model modular is also key. There's nothing that prevents someone from having an architecture that uses ChatGPT and Llama and something else and having a resolution layer. So that's one of the things that we're doing for increasing the efficiency and the effectiveness of model outputs. That's extremely interesting. So Thomas Malone from MIT Center for Collective Intelligence said, "Don't think humans in the loop, think computers in the group." So you've read Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, Kahneman's work. Yeah. So system one and system two thinking.
Yeah, my limbic response whole system is correlated with both that as well as the elephant and the rider analogy from the book Switch. If you've never read Switch, is another great way to think about the way that we think.
Yeah, Ian McGilchrist, his work in The Matter with Things also talks about this left brain, right brain. And so if you look at kind of what's going on right now, you could think that ChatGPT and all other things are really giving us a ton of intelligence as far as capabilities. Where the wisdom comes from, that kind of has to come from humans, or else we end up with the paperclip factory problem. If we sicked AI on a paperclip factory, it would just turn the world into paperclips because it doesn't have the wisdom not to turn the world into paperclips. But I just read a really good piece yesterday from Michael Dila out of Canada that talks about the idea of system 3. So ChatGPT is really good at system 2. If we could fundamentally find ways to get ChatGPT to help us as humans be better at system 1 thinking, enhance our intuition, be our thought partner, get us into knowledge flows, and it have learning loops with us. Where Michael talks about system 3 is the power of 2 or more nodes in supporting the conversation and scaffolding the innovation. So I do a ton of design partnerships where I'll prompt engineer with 2 people that want to design a show, solve a problem, write a book, whatever it is. And I'll just be that third person. But eventually we're going to get to the point where the design patterns for middleware are enough that there's a goal bot, or there's a book bot, or there's your autobiography bot, whatever those specialized types of bots are, that are just going to work with you and just help you, not as just an individual, but help you and a couple of people together. So I think that's interesting.
As an author of multiple books, one of the hardest things is when you do hit the wall and you're like, now I can't come up with anything. I'm stuck. My process for writing has always been that I consume vast amounts of data. I smoke a joint, and then I come up. Then all the combination of things, tends to come together in that moment of the right strain. I have certain strains for certain types of thinking. I'm admitting it here live online for folks. Do not have me tested for drugs, because I'm a big proponent of utilizing these things to help me think a little bit differently. And I think that is a really a different approach of what you're saying there, is really thinking about using these tools in conjunction with the wisdom of a human being. So that doesn't eliminate humans from the process. Actually, it makes humans that are good critical thinkers, or that can think outside the parameters of systems, extremely valuable, because they'll see things that the AI can't, and they'll ask questions of the AI that the AI or the average individual wouldn't even contemplate.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I don't have any kids, but if
Likewise,
in my conversation with people that do have kids, I've been trying to uncover, as you look out into the future world and AI is driving things, what are the 2 or 3 critical skills? And what I keep hearing over and over again is critical thinking, creativity, and resiliency. Those are the 3 that keep popping up more than ever. Because if you're a critical thinker and you're creative and you're resilient to change, you're going to be able to slice through the future like a Jedi with a lightsaber. But if you don't have all funny. 3 of those things, whoa.
Yeah. The emergence of resiliency consulting, I have had more and more friends of mine start to move into this resiliency consulting thing. And I think some of that came out of COVID, right? We understood that people just weren't as resilient, but man, it's a skill you got to learn right now. If you're not good at resiliency, I think that word's about 6 times in my book. It's like, this is what, to build adaptable systems that are agile, you have to build resiliency into them. And you have to really work these muscles. And these are not muscles that we are used to working. We as human beings tend to fall, going back to the system 1 and system 2. Our brain loves to just go through the day without having to do much deep critical thinking, because it requires a lot of energy. Anybody who's ever been through therapy, and I'm actually doing some videos right now about the concept of therapy. I challenged myself earlier this year. I said, I don't need therapy, but I'm going to go because I want to see what it's about. I want to understand what it's about. And Mike, I have to tell you that the thing that I've learned the most about therapy is not the advice the therapist gives me. It is this concept that I call deep listening. When you're paying somebody to listen to you and to dissect the words that you said and repeat them back to you and drive you to a conclusion that you know intrinsically, but can't identify. This feeling of deep thinking is something that I think from an evolutionary biology perspective, we as human beings did all the time. Because if you and I were sitting around the campfire and we heard a crack behind us in the darkness, what did we do? We focused all of our senses on this one thing to try to gain information. And when you sit across from a therapist or you do it via Zoom and you get this connection where you can see deeply that they're listening to what you're saying, and then when they respond and you like, the whole world just sort of goes away and you're just looking right into this person's face and all of your senses are focused on that experience. It does something to you, but it also is exhausting. I mean, it's just like 45 minutes of a session and you're just like, oh my God, I'm energized, but I'm also depleted. I've had that sort of death of ego once again, where I've sort of fallen into the funeral pyre and allowed myself to be consumed. And those are skills that we just don't have. We don't refine those enough, I think, anymore as human beings.
Well, okay, so when does someone trust the virtual AI-driven meta-human as their coach? So what you described there is the conversation you're having between you and the therapist. They're making you go into system 1 thinking. They're also giving you what I call brain boomerangs, where you got to think about that and send that on a cycle, kind of taking you deeper through those brain boomerangs, and then also adding on some system 1. Then they're listening to you, and then they're summarizing what you're saying, reflecting it back to you. And based on that, if they were able to identify a fallacy that you might have or find something, dig deeper, they're going to ask you another question. So that fundamental design pattern, I'll say middlewaring therapy conversations, totally possible. Having a really good metahuman, totally possible. All these things are totally possible, but that doesn't mean that people want it. That doesn't mean that people use it. So that becomes the challenge. And so how do you create really compelling interactions with good rapport building and other things so that you really like that metahuman on the other end of the line?
Yeah, I think too, Mike. The other lesson I would take out of that is that if you're an executive right now and you aren't experiencing that, therapy is a great way to experience that, because you're paying somebody to hang on every single word you say. And I got to tell you, I had an experience with my therapist a couple weeks back, and it's funny because I just bought this little 3 package thing, and I'm like, I'm just going to do this because I have my. I talk to him every week now. It's my best call of the week. I love exploring thoughts with him. I love to having these sort of conversations, and I really now value that deep listening that comes out of it. And I think it's made me a significantly better consultant. And I think it's allowed me to think about even the businesses I work with in a totally different way. I can get this, I'm training my brain now to do that focused. There's a crack in the darkness. I need to really focus all 100% of all of my resources and senses on this in order to come to a conclusion on what this is. Is it a risk? Is it a threat? Is it all these kind of things? That is a skill that we as executives really should be doing right now when it comes to things like AI. And it's a skill that we don't have. So I've recently told 2 executive friends of mine, I'm like, hire a freaking therapist. They're like, I don't need therapy. I'm like, that's not the point. The point is to learn how to listen at that depth of human level that's biologically encoded into us, that we used to do 10 times a day that we haven't done in 6 years. And I think about that experience of that deep listening when I'm going through it. The only other times I can remember doing it in my life are usually when I got a phone call, your mom just died, your dad just died, where all of my senses focus in that moment on the present, and I'm comprehending things in a little bit of a different way, and it almost becomes a little bit surreal. That's a skill we need as executives if we're going to survive in this environment where that level of change is going to happen exponentially or tetrationally in real time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think another thing to add on to like the executive viewpoint of listening is the answer to the future is in all of your people. The question is, how do you get them together, afford them the time and space, bolt on the additional knowledge and capabilities that you need to, and kind of fast forward. When I think about change, I talk about going perpendicular, kind of around the corner. We've got to be able to kind of future cast just enough around the corner to see what we should be doing and what effect, it had on us to be able to come back and then orient ourselves to make that turn in some ways.
Yeah. I've used this analogy before of having your hair cut, and I say everybody is capable of cutting their own hair. Why don't most people do it? Well, you got the reverse image in the mirror. You can't get the right perspectives. Being able to get out of yourself and being able to look at these things in a very different perspective is what's really needed right now. And I think it's going to be the difference between success and failure in the next 5 years as AI emerges and becomes something that is a force to be reckoned with. I think right now it's a force to be reckoned with, but I don't think people truly understand the dimension of where this is going. Mike, I can't believe we've already talked for 50 minutes and we're essentially out of time. We got to just book another session because I think there's so much to this that we need to. I don't even think we've scratched the surface just yet. I think in a lot of senses, this has been my therapy session with you, of you educating me and getting me on board with the right terminology and those kind of things so that we can go to that next level.
I love it. This is a great jam session. I greatly appreciate it. I love this stuff, and I like geeking out with you. Let's accelerate.
Let's just schedule another one. Yeah, I think let's schedule another one because I think we can use these as the premise of understanding of the way that you're thinking about systems, the way that you're thinking about human learning and AI, and then we can get down this rabbit hole a little bit. Some of the things I did with your friend Pravir, who just. That was a deep thing. There were times where he said things. Anybody that listened to this show knows that I'm never at a loss for words. There's long pauses in my conversation with him where I'm just like deer in the headlights, drool coming out of the corner of my mouth. It's very different. And I'd love to go that place with you as well. Mike, how do people find out more about you and your work? They can Google you and find your TED Talk. I'd love to talk, how do people find out more about you in the interim before we have you back as a guest again?
Yeah, Michael Hruska on LinkedIn or www.problemsolutions.net. Company I founded after I left NIST, and we love building lightsabers for people.
I love that too. Well, I know I'm speaking with your team next week about a lightsaber that I want to build, so I'm excited about that and really looking forward to it. And thank you all for joining us on another edition of the Convergence. As you can tell, in the last few weeks, we have really started to go farther and farther down the rabbit hole of AI. We've got some exciting things coming later on this month, including a live show through a partnership with a very influential TikToker in the AI space, which is going to be a lot of fun. We're gonna do some solutioning real time, and I'm sure we'll have folks like Mike come on and help us with that project. But again, thanks for tuning into the Convergence. Make sure you like and subscribe, and until next time.
Thanks for listening to The Convergence. If you want more information about the topics you've heard here today, reach out to us at theconvergencepodcast.com.